New report suggests the games industry is failing LGBTQ players. Advocacy group GLAAD has won the numbers and they're not great. Meanwhile, they show a picture of Life is Strange True Colors when Alex and Stephanie were kissing. If you chose that path. I've known that representation in games mattered since that day in 1987 when I finished Metroid and discovered that. Okay, this is by the way, who wrote this? This is by Carolyn Petit. These are her words. I've known that representation in games mattered since that day in 1987 when I finished Metroid and discovered that intergalactic bounty hunter Samus Aran was the rarest of things for the time, a cool female video game protagonist. I love playing as Mario or Link or any intrepid hero, but I was particularly thrilled to see a game say that women can be heroes too. Now with games a more important cultural force than ever, the influential media advocacy organization GLAAD has released its first ever in-depth report examining how games are doing in terms of LGBTQ representation. That was all me. The data strongly suggests that on one hand, games play an important role in the lives of many queer players, particularly queer youth, and the other that games are falling for short in terms of adequately representing and reaching these players. The report released today is packed with interesting and important statistics collected in partnership with the media data and analytics firm Nielsen, and you can see its entirety here. Among GLAAD's most striking findings is that 17% of active gamers identify as LGBTQ. That sounds a little high, to be honest. And yet only a paltry 2% of games on major PC and console storefronts, PSN, Steam, and Nintendo eShop, and so on, are tagged as having LGBTQ content, suggesting that games which actually feature queer characters or storylines remain extremely rare. With big influential games like The Last of Us Part 2 and Apex Legends prominently featuring queer and trans characters, it's perhaps easy to feel like LGBTQ representation in games is more widespread than it actually is, when the reality may be that the industry is still falling well short of adequately reflecting the LGBTQ player base. Games are a refuge for many queer players. The data shows that many people who play games are queer, and that games often play a particularly important role in their lives. For many of them, in this period when hundreds of pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation, please name one, are being introduced, games may be something of a safe haven. Yes, you're being treated like a third world class citizen, but video games make you escape that completely. Anyway, according to GLAAD, 55% of LGBTQ gamers who reside in states where such legislation has been proposed or passed say they feel more accepted in the gaming community than they do in general public areas where they live. 65% of players in these states say they depend on games to get through tough times, and a whopping 75% say that games allow them to express themselves in ways they don't feel comfortable doing so in the real world. I love how they go through the percentage, because it would look like such a low number if they gave the actual numbers.
Mm-hmm.
As a trans person who grew up with games and who has known many other queer and trans people for whom games have been a vital avenue of exploration and expression in a hostile world, I wasn't exactly surprised by this data, and yet seeing numbers asserting just how widespread such experience are is powerful and compelling. On a video call, I asked Blair Durkee, Associate Director of Gaming for GLAAD, about the perception that games are doing better on the LGBTQ representation front than they actually are. I think so much of our media is dominated by people who live in more progressive areas, she said, and they forget that there's a wide swath of the country that is still deep, deep in this anti-LGBTQ culture. There's a reason for that. That was one of the things that we tried to highlight with our stats, looking at LGBTQ gamers who live in more restrictive states that have passed or proposed anti-LGBTQ legislation versus LGBTQ gamers in other areas. Even as many LGBTQ players find opportunities for community and self-expression in games, they also remain at higher risk for harassment in gaming spaces, with 54% saying they experience harassment when playing online and 64% expressing discomfort about using voice chat in online games. Pause. I got Did someone say a mean word to you? Was it because they were competing against you, or because you were you fit in the alphabet mafia?
The Alphabet Mafia. Funny.
The capitalist argument for better LGBTQ representation in games. Oh my god, this
Hmm.
woman. Of course, GLAAD isn't just collecting this data because it's interesting. The organization hopes to encourage developers and studios to do more to reflect and represent LGBTQ players. A common argument I've heard for why games haven't made more effort to incorporate gay and trans characters and storylines is that developers or publishers may be afraid of alienating or driving away non LGBTQ players. However, the data suggests that game developers are leaving money on the table as LGBTQ players gravitate towards games in which they conceive themselves reflected. I'll be rebutting that at the end of this article. Meanwhile, 60% of non LGBTQ players say that playing as an LGBT character would make no difference in their decision to buy a game. The resistance toward LGBTQ content in games is waning, says the report's introduction, as each successive generation of gamers is more diverse and more open to seeing LGBTQ representation in their games. When I asked Durkee what she hopes the report might help to accomplish, she said that it's about changing the way the industry really thinks about our community. She references comments made by Dragon Age lead writer David Gator, who said that there's a percentage of the gaming population, like queer and trans players, which is already playing despite it being essentially uninvited, and the industry sees us as gravy, a nice extra, but not a group worth catering to directly. All this work that we've been doing over the last several years, Durkee said, has been aimed at changing that mentality. Our community is a huge percentage of the overall gaming population, nearly 1 in 5. Yeah, right. And if you're ignoring that community, you're doing it to your own detriment. There's much more to gain by being inclusive and by expanding your audience than by catering to the same old demographic over and over. Um, so I want to pull up comments, and then I'll be happy to rip this person apart, this person's arguments. Um, so hold on. Did I? Yeah, here we go. Okay, just let me get back to the comments. The top comments, anyway. Uh, damn, how far down did I go? Wow. Okay, here we go. Uh, uh, Santa goes, we found, quote, we found that games with LGBT characters or storylines account for less than 2% of all games, end quote. Having more games for LGBTQ inclusion is great, but looking at that 2% number of games, having the tag character storyline is a bit skewed. As I'm guessing, it's counting all games, not just games where it would make sense to include an LGBTQ content character storyline. Because that means Tetris, for example, would be driving down the numbers. Same with, for example, Among Us, ARK Survival, Ascended, Goat Simulator, and so on. If it's only counting games where it makes sense, then the numbers would look different. I suspect probably still extremely low, but not as bad as 2%. Lubes and NJ goes. So what you're saying is that context is key, and absent context, you're just spitting numbers out that have no meaning. Hippos Humors goes. To be fair, gay Tetris sounds pretty fun. Academic in Prokhorov goes, this was my thinking as well. What is required for that tag to be added? I would think that bar is high. Wonder needs to get this tag. And I went checking on Steam and found out that most highly rated games with LGBTQ tag is Sonic X Shadow Generations. I'm out. I don't even know anymore. Um, do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
You go first. You know more about this stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Let me start with this. Representation in gaming of any group is nonsense. Cut it out. You know what game does you know what game is really franchise is really popular? Wasn't there a franchise called Pokemon?
No, about it.
How many gamers love Pokemon because they feel they can relate to Pikachu?
Pikachu.
You know another franchise that I remember that's really successful? Kirby. How many people feel they can relate to a pink fluff ball?
Yeah. And he's a badass at the same time too.
And then they said they brought up Tetris. What, we're just gonna start throwing gay characters and queer characters in everywhere? No.
Yeah, gay blocky,
Yeah,
square,
yeah,
mealy.
yeah. I could just imagine. They probably want gay characters in Tetris. Uh, I, where why do people have to be in Tetris now? What next? What next? Goat Simulator? We're gonna have a gay goat? How do you tell the difference between a straight goat and a gay goat?
Goat Simulator queers version.
I mean, yeah, like I said, and that one of the people, I forget his name, but he said it. It should be based on context, And before anyone tries to say I'm transphobic or lesbian phobic or whatever, you know, I played Life is Strange before the storm. I played Life is Strange True Colors all the way through. In Life is Strange before the storm, Chloe and that blonde chick, I forgot her name. She was the DA's daughter. Do you remember?
I don't remember. So I went up to chapter 1 so far.
Okay, well, of course. Anyway, they had a relationship, lovers relationship, and then in Life is Strange True Colors, when you play as Alex, you can either choose her to go with Stephanie or choose her to date your brother's friend. And I chose Stephanie because of reasons, not just because it would be cool to see.
Oh yeah.
And the thing is, I enjoyed both those games, but this whole representation nonsense has got to stop. And it's not just in video games. It's got to stop in movies. It's got to stop in TV shows. No one cares. You know what? I used to say, to each their own. Whatever you want to do in your bedroom, whoever you want to screw in your bedroom, as long as they're at the age of consent, it's fine. Yeah, leave it in the bedroom. No one wants to see. No one wants to go. No one wants to hear someone go, "I'm gay," and that's my identity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you know what? I can play that game. I'm straight. I'm heterosexual. That's my identity. Now what victim circumstances can I bring up of how I've been unfairly treated?
You can't give Stacey Keebler at the time.
But I'm serious. I'm serious. The reason that me and other people are so sick of this shit is because of this diversity, equity, inclusion crap that really should be dead and buried. You want to live your life, pick up a controller, play a game that you think you like because of the story or the gameplay or both, and play it and shut the hell up. I played many games where I wasn't represented in a way. Did that hurt the experience I had? No.
Of course not. And if I can say,
like I said, I played Pokemon. I played not to cut you off, but I wasn't done. I played Pokemon. I played Kirby. I played Life is Strange, which the 3 games in the first arc all had female leads. And I still had a fun time playing those games. Why do you think that was? Because of representation? Obviously not. Like I said, no one's playing Pokemon because they feel like they can relate to Pikachu. If they do, they need professional help. Dr. Games 101, what do you want to say?
I just want to say too, as a black person, a black gamer, if you want to call me like that. I mean, in today's world, there's not that many representation of black characters, but I'm not complaining about that. It's like they're back in the 90s as well too, with X-Men, fucking Pokemon. I didn't ask for all the include every single character be black, whether it's that chick from a Pokemon black and white version. I forgot her name already. They included her in for what else reasons? The inclusive reasons here. Black and white TV shows, whatever it's called, it's Pokemon. So, but other than that, no. I mean, there's characters like from DC Comics called Stag Shock, whatever, in the 2000s. That was it back then. I was glad that they had Stag Shock and stuff like that, and they didn't care about anything else. I mean, all because of the fact that people back then and for the last 25, 30 years now have from a different background altogether, the grouping of the developers. Now more people are being more lesbian focused, or they're lesbians themselves in these gaming industries making games now. Now it's more inclusive than ever in gaming altogether. It's not a shitload of LGBT games out there, but there's plenty out there to choose from. Like, what's the game I played that got me 200 gamer score? It was called it was a blind girl, Beyond Eyes. That's like LGBT friendly of sorts. So if you want to put it that way, the girl was like, blind and handicapped, stuff like that. You want to include that type of people into that gaming sphere of sorts. So okay, no big deal, right? So what do you want more of? If you want to have some inclusion in your games, make the game yourself and then include that stuff into your own little type of project. No, it's not forcing you to force onto others about of your beliefs and all. Make your own game, make your own content. That's how I look at it.
Yeah,
I'm
and
not forcing DC and X-Men and DC Marvel comics to make my characters black, whatever, or whatever the case may be.
right.
So
Yeah, I mean, they probably would love to make like Tony Hawk, Tanya Hawk, or something. Um,
yeah,
don't I shouldn't really give them any ideas.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But like I said, this representation crap is not. It's just that it's crap. No one, like I said, no one played Pokemon. Um, no one plays what Transformers. What how many people could say they can relate to a Transformer?
Mm-hmm.
Pokemon, Kirby. I could go on and on. I,
Mario.
well, Mario's kind of just a white plumber, but
Yeah,
I
he wants to
mean,
be part of the USSR and all that. Those rumors here. That Mario was like a communist dictator taking over Bowser's castle and shit like that. It was a big rumor back in the '90s about the matter. So
yeah, but I mean, like, okay, another one, Donkey Kong Country. How many people feel they can relate to an ape?
and they made fun of it for over the decades too. Oh, that's inclusion, Doctor Games. See, Donkey Kong is black, all that shit I hear. I mean, I'm not fucking destroyed by it or fucking offended by it at all times, but it's whatever. Okay,
Yeah,
it was a joke, pretty much.
so I mean, anyway, that's just what I had to say. This representation bullshit is nonsense. Cut out the nonsense. And you know what? If the game calls for an LGBT, I'm just gonna say it, alphabet mafia character to be included, and it makes sense for that kind of character to be included, then include it. Because like I said, I enjoyed Life is Strange before the storm. Life is Strange True Colors. How did I enjoy those games if I'm a guy and the lead in those games were all female
Mm-hmm.
with lesbian tendencies, by the way? Because
Oh
I
yeah.
don't care about representation. I cared about the story that was told, and it was a good story. I enjoyed going through the story.
Plus, I hear it was similar to the TV shows like Dawson's Creek in the '90s and all. So it's kind of like we expect that over the decades of our formatted of preferences of what we watch or play in our video games or TV shows. So it's kind of like it's part of the culture no matter what. So if
Yeah,
you
but
if you can mix in that culture somewhat in the matter, then more power to you.
and another thing, just in the U.S., there's like 330 million people. How many people of that 330 million identify with the alphabet army?
2% at most 5%.
Yeah. Sorry, you're not the majority. We're not going to make games just to stroke your ego. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm trying to think of other games. Um,
The Harry Potter game was a big thing with the trans community back then, back earlier last year. They came out on
yeah,
the
that's
you know
Hogwarts Legacy, which actually ended up selling real well.
yeah, J.K. Rowling, all because of J.K. Rowling was against transgenderism
She
or
wasn't even against
yeah.
it. She just said she wasn't gonna cater to them.
Of course, yeah, something similar like that. Like it was not even that hard on the transgender community. She just it wasn't involved like that. She's a woman trying to make some money with her Harry Potter books. That's all.
Yeah. You know what? I can't play Rayman Legends anymore because I can't relate to Rayman.
Yeah, I want to be the floaty head guy in Rayman. Yeah, yeah. And I pop like a balloon when I stick my ass on those spikes in the down below. Yeah.
That's how ridiculous that this representation gets. I mean, so
Yeah.
like I said, to any game developer out there, if you want to include the character, just make sure it fits the story and it makes sense. Then everyone will be fine with it. You're not really missing money. You're not really leaving money on the table because if it's a great game, then someone who does identify as one of those players will play it anyway. But don't go out of your way just to cater to these people because it's never enough.
Hmm. I mean, I see this though, because generalize if I can to some extent. There's been a lot of things happen in history as a country, as United States people in our past over the last 200 years, obviously. But in the last 50 years now, it got much better with equality and rights for everyone, and you can do what the fuck you want to do, so you don't harm others in the process. So that's it. Hey, we're in the most calm period in our era of any part of the United States history. You know, you do what you want to do. You can sleep where you want to sleep. You work as much as you want to. You go to these places to learn our culture and history of the United States, whether it's about the Lewis and Clark expedition or about the presidents of the United States. You name it. You know, like, but don't force your own beliefs to develop within you onto others and thinking that it's going to happen like that overnight. Okay, you gotta like be creative and also with understanding other people's boundaries as well too. So that's
Yeah,
what's going on. So
and another thing, if they were really like, if game developers were really leaving so much money on the table, why have companies that bent the knee, that pander to these people, lost money?
oh yeah,
The Last of Us 2 didn't do so well because it bent the knee to these maniacs.
yeah, that was a big deal back 3 years ago when it came out. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, so don't tell them. So um, so yeah, Carolyn Platin and anyone who thinks like her really need a reality check.
Hmm.
And another thing about harassment um in online gaming. Do you know how toxic Call of Duty's lobbies were on the Xbox 360 like 10 years ago?
At most
You
12.
think you think whatever you encounter, I bet you whatever you encounter does is a minute fraction of what when compared to what happened in those Xbox 360 lobbies for Call of Duty 10, 15 years ago. And it wasn't because they were trans, it wasn't because they were some other identity, it's because they were playing the game and they decided to trash talk.
And most of the
So
time, it was just about niggers and Jews and Nazis. That's about it.
so anyway, yeah, that's all I have to say.